last year, a bit of a backlash erupted when the NHS UK announced that it will be sharing patient data to private businesses. Now, this led to more than 1 million patients opting out of the scheme, numerous campaign groups raising privacy concerns, and overall a bit of a media backlash. And the NHS, they tried to clarify that this data would be anonymous, that we won't be selling it to marketing companies, to insurance companies. It will only be used for research purposes. But the damage was done and the scheme had to be postponed. Now, the funny thing is, if I ask most of you in this room, would you be willing to share your data for, let's say, a clinical trial to help cure a particular disease? Quite likely you'd say yes, with some caveats. And this is exactly what the EU Commission found. They found that 83% of people were willing to share their health data as long as they had transparency over who had access to that data and how it is being used. And this is the crux of the problem. It's not that we mind people using our data or being shared, it's that there's this lack of involvement of the patient and transparency over it. It's this feeling that there's information which is mine and it's being sort of taken without my permission. So this is what blockchain really came in to solve. First the regulators came in to solve this. They said, okay, we will be the watchdogs. We will make sure we ensure that everything is in the best interest of the patient and of society, and we will give comfort and confidence to the system. Now, in practice, what does that mean? That means informed consent, paper trails, audit inspections, cybersecurity practices, and more. And what's this resulting in? It's resulting in the data, many copies of that data being stored by multiple parties, increasing the expense and actually increasing the likelihood of that data being exposed. It's putting a lot of bureaucracy in the process of being able to access that data, making it slower and more difficult to get access to that data. And in fact, a lot of health innovators who maybe don't have the experience or the connections to get access to data in a compliant way are being left out of this. And it's not really helping with the transparency from the patient's point of view and their understanding of what is happening with their data. So this is what blockchain came in to solve. Originally, it came in to solve the lack of trust and transparency in the financial sector. So it said, okay, let's do peer-to-peer transactions. Let's remove the banks and the governments, and with that, remove the single point of failure risks, and then the regulators don't need to be regulating the middleman because they no longer exist, and we can streamline the whole process. And instead it said, let's create a distributed network where we have multiple players who will be involved in verifying the transactions and use economic incentives and actually game theory to incentivize people to be honest and disincentivize dishonesty. So we can take a lot of the learnings which we've had from the financial sector into the healthcare industry. And this is something that my company, Aria, has been working on for the last 3 years. We have an ecosystem built and being used by multiple hospitals. So particularly what we want to look at is the disconnected relationship between the patient and the healthcare stakeholders. So I'm going to talk about 3 key elements in this session. So data sovereignty, decentralization, and incentivization structures and how they apply here. So the first one is data sovereignty. So we have a disconnect or a separation between who owns the data, which is the patient, the citizen, and who is currently controlling the data, which can be multiple parties. And what blockchain enables to do is to bring alignment to these 2 roles. So we can actually assign the ownership of digital information to the actual owner, giving them the keys to control how that data is accessed. And that then allows the patient to be able to give access for personal reasons. So that could be for a second medical opinion, for an insurance claim, for personalized medicine, or it could be for more aggregate reasons such as towards research. And what this does is it also solves a lot of the regulatory issues, because now you have the patient involved. You now have explicit consent. They are aware of what's happening to their data. They're choosing what happens to their data. And so it streamlines a lot of the process and it brings transparency to the process. But this doesn't really exist unless we bring in the decentralization aspect. So we need to first remove or sort of change the relationship of the current, let's say, pseudo owners, and take it from centralized entities having the full control and decision-making power, and instead put that into a distributed network where there is no single party which can exert authority or control over the data, except for the true owner, which is the patient. Now, you probably mostly have heard about public blockchains. So when we hear about Bitcoin and different cryptocurrencies, we're talking about public blockchains. Now, in a public blockchain, that means anyone can download the blockchain and the data in it, and anyone can contribute information to that. In healthcare, we need to be a little bit more selective. We need to make sure we're aligned with the regulations, and of course, we have to be more cautious about, the quality of the data. It's all about the quality of the data. So we would be looking, and as we have, a permissioned blockchain where we will have specific entities who will be allowed to contribute high quality data and machine readable data to the system, and also who will be able to actually hold nodes. So let me talk about this concept of nodes. So when I say, okay, no longer central entity, it's now going to be all these different parties, different stakeholders. Well, those are the different nodes in the network. And they have two core roles. One is the storage of the encrypted data, and the second part is to verify the legitimacy of those transactions. So a transaction may be a hospital submitting a piece of data to the blockchain. It may be a patient claiming ownership to that data, or it may be a patient sharing the access to that data. So these nodes, through an algorithm, not manually, will be looking at the predefined rules of what different parties can be doing and verifying that indeed, this hospital can do this and this patient can do that, and ensuring that all the agreed by the whole ecosystem, those actions are legitimate. And we work on the basis that it is the wisdom of the group, so the majority of parties have to be in agreement for this. Now, the second part of this is storing the encrypted data. Now, this is not using blockchain. It's actually very difficult to store, an actual amount of data on a blockchain, but we can still use the concept of distributed systems and decentralization in order to distribute the data across multiple users. And the benefit that this mainly brings is, one, you have better data availability, as even if multiple nodes go down, you have a lot of redundancy in the system. Secondly, we reduce the infrastructure costs, because now, rather than each individual company saying, okay, I have to store my data, and I just want to clarify here, I'm not necessarily saying the hospitals shouldn't store their own data, but at least all the parties who will be getting that copies of the data, they're not now necessarily having to store that, but rather we can spread the cost of that storage across all the players in the network. So it becomes a collaborative approach, and therefore individually it can reduce the costs, and it increases the data reliability. We can get the data direct from the source, and blockchain is immutable, so you can't change or edit there, so you can feel much more confident and trust that this is the original data. So what we have achieved here is now we've given sovereignty back to the patient, and we've enabled the decentralized ecosystem. So we kind of solved the original problem of, okay, great, patients have more transparency, great, we have a lot of the regulatory issues solved, as we actually have the patients executing their own data rights, so they're involved in all that process. But as I was discussing with a number of people here yesterday, there are a lot of different parties which need to be involved in a system like this. But that's the great thing about blockchain. It's all about bringing together collaboration and actually thinking, what is each party's incentive? Why do they want to be part of this? And how can we design a system that acts as a bit of a win-win for everyone? So there are two kind of main let's say, reasons why people sort of want to be involved in this. And the first part is people that need access to the data, organizations that need access to the data. So you've got pharmaceutical drug discovery, insurance underwriting, data to train AI bots, personalized medicine, the patients, obviously. So those people are saying, okay, we want this data, we need access to this data in the most efficient, compliant way. And then the other side is the parties which may have a financial benefit from this. So, there are parties now, as we said with the NHS UK, sharing this data, selling this data. So whether that's the medical provider, the patient, the health system, all these parties who are currently involved in creating that data should have the right to have some sort of reward from that data. The other common part is the data aggregator. So we have specialists who are out there sourcing this data, cleaning this data, putting together good data sets, which was mentioned before is very key. It's one thing having data, it's another thing having a quality data set that can actually be used. And so what we have done is we've created a system. So it's not just blockchain, but obviously all the different elements in that. So the way our system works is that we first work with the hospitals and we create integrations with them. So we go to their hospital information system, create an integration, and then allow the patients to create their own blockchain wallets, which you have via our apps, and then they can request their data from their different medical providers. We automate the whole process so that the data then goes directly into the patient's blockchain wallet in a machine readable format. So it needs to be first, raw structured data, which is usable. And then the patients have the option to either share this individually, as I mentioned, for a second medical opinion, or they can contribute this to a data pool. Now, this is where the concept of smart contracts come in. And we have then the aggregators who will be able to accept this data from the patient, will be able to create these data sets, and then we'll be able to place this on a marketplace. And it's the aggregators which are setting then the terms of the contract. So they would have already agreed with the patient, for example, what percentage maybe they will take from this. Also to note that when the data was sent by the medical provider, the provider will be linked to that data. And so then when the third party comes along and says, okay, I need to get access to data, they can automatically enter into a smart contract where firstly they know that all the permissions have been given for this data to be shared, and then the transaction, the financial part, can be distributed to all the players who are part of the system. Yes, we can say the patients are the key, but there are a lot of different parties who have actually contributed to making this available. So we can then distribute that, as I said, to the medical provider, the patient, the aggregator, and anyone else who's involved in that process. So I don't think I have time to do a bit of a demo on our app, but let me just conclude. So what we see really is that by using blockchain, smart contracts, and digital currencies, we can bring a disconnected system to become a transparent ecosystem. It is all about sharing that information and enabling more democratization in terms of who can access that data. So we're giving more ability for different parties to actually get access to data sets, and also about democratization of the financial side of allowing all the different parties who are vital to getting this data available to be rewarded. In turn, with everybody incentivized, then that also allows us to be able to get more data to the system, again, increasing our ability to advance the future of health. So, yeah, happy to talk to anyone after us, but thank you.